Greetings, everyone. Here are the main points of today's video. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers are trapped. Thousands of Russia's most advanced tanks have become immobile heaps of scrap metal, trapping more than 600,000 soldiers in a deadly bottleneck stretching over 1,000 kilometers. What is the truth behind this logistical collapse that is forcing Moscow to abandon modern combined arms tactics and return to bloody and tearful human wave strategies? Russia's strategic missile brain has been removed from the geopolitical map. In just 3 short months, Ukraine has used surgical strikes to take down all 3 of Russia's top-secret semiconductor microelectronics factories, making it impossible to resume producing superweapons like the Iskander or S-400 because of the embargo. Even worse, a coordinated strike and a factory that was still operating normally are turning the Kremlin's massive artillery ammunition stockpile into ticking time bombs that could detonate at any moment. President Putin is unaware, as military collapses trigger a chain reaction. Amid the chaos in Russia's rear, as panic spreads due to severe shortages and the supply chains of its allies collapse like dominoes, is this the strategic breaking point that will completely end the war machine of Moscow? Welcome to the analysis program of Luan Banshinsu. Before we get into the content, please take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue. Thank you, dear audience. Ukraine destroyed Russia's semiconductor heart, Russian tanks were immobilized, and infantry had to carry ammunition on foot. Ladies and gentlemen, the Russian Federation's war machine is facing a silent but critical depletion, a supreme weapon that is not easily replaced. Western observers often focus their attention on casualties, loss of life, or equipment losses on the battlefield, but if we only look at those, we will miss the bigger strategic picture. In reality, despite doubts, the Kremlin has managed, one way or another, to maintain its manpower supply, whether through huge bonuses, recruiting foreign soldiers, or prisoner programs. However, blood and manpower have never been enough to sustain a modern war of attrition. The backbone of the front line lies in the logistics supply chain, and the lifeblood that sustains it is fuel. This is the real weak point that's bleeding the most. A comprehensive energy crisis is besieging Russia as Ukraine's drone attacks continuously paralyze key oil and gas infrastructure. The war corridor stretching from the Donbass region to the Crimean Peninsula is being ruthlessly squeezed. On the front lines, tanks suddenly turn into immobile blocks of steel, supply convoys go up in flames, and armored units can't maintain any offensives without fuel. The tragedy is that Moscow doesn't have enough capacity to reverse the situation, because restoring the damaged oil refineries will take months. According to the latest data from Reuters, some facilities will have to wait until 2027 to be rebuilt. Right now, more than 600,000 Russian soldiers are trapped in a bottleneck with a neck over 1,000 kilometers long, where the flow of logistics is narrowing day by day. The most vicious blow is being dealt on the southern battlefield, where troops are entrenched from Koimbaya to the Kherson riverbank. Zaporizhia now depends on the war's most fragile supply line, since the Kerch Bridge's transport capacity has been greatly reduced. The only remaining lifeline is the G28 highway running from the port of Rostov-on-Don through occupied territories like Mariupol, Berdyansk, and Melitopol to enter Crimea. Moscow once poured up to $11.8 billion into this corridor since 2024, but Ukraine has turned that massive investment into a deadly trap. Every link along this route is in the sights of Ukrainian UAV units, turning the Berdyansk highway into the most heavily bombarded hotspot. The clearest evidence of this disruption is the fate of a Russian airborne regiment stationed on the Kimbrel Peninsula. When the supply of fuel, ammunition, and food was completely cut off, the soldiers were forced to abandon their positions. A retreat was confirmed by the commander of the Southern Operational Command of Ukraine. This exhaustion is now more evident than ever on the Gulyabat front. A report from a Ukrainian regimental commander shows that Russian ammunition and drone supplies have dropped significantly. The number of URA reconnaissance UAVs has dropped by up to 2/3, forcing infantry units to manually carry each artillery shell on their backs. It's both tragic and ironic that soldiers from an army considered one of the most mechanized have to walk to transport ammunition simply because the supply trucks no longer have a drop of fuel to start their engines. In the east, right in the center of Donbass, the crisis takes on a different aspect. On the Lyman front, the Russian army is frantically intensifying their attacks in a hurry because they know that fuel quotas will only get tighter. According to analysis from the Institute for the Study of War, ISW and ISVK, this pressure is forcing Russian commanders to launch reckless and poorly prepared attacks around the Pokrovsk area. Russian military bloggers continuously report on the situation of supply convoys being delayed, fuel being distributed in small amounts, and an extremely tense atmosphere enveloping the command headquarters. The nightmare doesn't stop there. In the Kharkiv direction to the north, the logistics problem is not just about fuel. While the supply routes from Belgorod and Kursk are constantly being harassed by Ukrainian UAVs, the Russian army also has to face a severe air defense crisis. To protect the capital Moscow from long-range attacks, the Kremlin has had to withdraw some air defense missile systems from the front lines and border areas back to the interior. As a result, the frontline units not only lack fuel, but also lose their air defense cover. At the Belgorod and Kursk logistics bases, the strategic balance has collapsed as they have to be self-sufficient for their own needs, while also straining to support the front lines amid a nationwide fuel shortage. The units suffering the heaviest losses are the tank forces, armored vehicles, and logistics convoys, which are entirely dependent on energy supplies. The Russian military is estimated to need up to 15 million liters, but less is consistently reaching the front lines. A strategic calculation shows that a T-72 tank carries 1,590 liters of fuel and consumes between 2 to 4 liters for every kilometer traveled in complex terrain conditions. A tank battalion can burn through in a few days the amount of fuel that a civilian business would take several months to consume. Now those fuel tanks are empty. Even more frightening, the fuel-starved convoys not only leave behind dead tanks, but also lead to the disappearance of ammunition, drone batteries, and food supplies. When logistics freeze, the entire unit will lose communication and combat capability. This very energy crisis is forcing the Russian army to abandon mechanized combined arms tactics and switch to infantry-led tactics, a strategic retreat full of blood and tears. When tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and BMPTs are disabled, the attacking forces are forced to narrow their scale, become predictable, and rely entirely on human wave tactics. The plan for Russia's summer offensive campaign in the Tokat, Liman, and southern front directions is being stretched out over a long period. Data from the SVK shows that although the frequency of Russian attacks has increased, their scale has shrunk, leading to rushed, hasty battles that lack coordination and result in casualty rates reaching their peak. The inevitable consequence is that for most of June, specifically from the 1st to the 22nd, the Russian army recorded for the first time losses exceeding 1,000 soldiers per day since the milestone of March 2025. This is no longer a military campaign, but a foretold tragedy of attrition from a geopolitical perspective. The war of attrition is exposing a harsh mathematical paradox on the geopolitical chessboard. According to military intelligence sources, in just a single day, the Russian army suffered equipment losses amounting to as much as $331 million. The fuel shortage does not stop the offensives. On the contrary, it pushes Moscow into a contradictory predicament. They are making efforts to increase the frequency of raids, but with resources running increasingly low. And the price to pay is that the casualty rate, the loss of lives, multiplies exponentially. When the pace of operations on the battlefield is delayed, the burden on the logistics forces grows in inverse proportion. By now, the convoys are no longer just quiet supply runs. They have become moving targets desperately in need of protection. The tremendous pressure from Ukraine's swarms of unmanned aerial vehicles has forced Moscow to pull back mobile firepower units from the front lines to guard every meter of road for the logistics convoys. This compromise has left frontline units with severe firepower shortages. In fact, to survive and save every drop of fuel, some units have had to riskily requisition civilian vehicles to transport essential supplies. They tried to erase military traces by crudely camouflaging the sides of the trucks with makeshift paint, a risky, inefficient adaptation that reflects the utter deadlock of a large military entity. On the mossy, decaying trenches, rotating troops is becoming an impossible task. Units are stuck in place for weeks on end in exhaustion, with weary soldiers and scarce ammunition, left with nothing to do but look up and hopelessly wait for reinforcements. The accumulation of this despair is deepening a fatal wound in the modern military history of Russia. Now the shadow of 2022 is returning, but on a much larger and more devastating scale, causing the collapse in the soldiers' morale to be even more profound and alarming than what statistics can reveal. On social media, Russian military bloggers who have long supported the Kremlin have lost their patience. They openly criticize each other. The harsh truth is clear. Without fuel, no offensive can exist. A famous war commentator known for his caustic remarks bitterly summed up the situation in tragic words. The command centers are bleeding, microelectronic components are being crushed, the Achilles heel lies at the refueling stations, and the enemy's overall goal is to completely isolate the Timur Peninsula. These panicked warnings did not come from the opposition, but from the most extreme voices within the pro-war faction itself. President Vladimir Putin is becoming increasingly isolated and is receiving misinformation about both the actual progress on the battlefield and developments in military technology. The secret reports filtered and downplayed by Chief of General Staff Gerasimov have created a deceptive illusion, obscuring the harsh reality at the front lines from the Kremlin leader. While soldiers in the trenches face the harsh reality of bombs and shortages, the leader in the palace looks at rosy maps. The wider the gap between illusion and reality grows, the faster the fighting spirit fades. Taking advantage of this strategic disconnect, on June 23rd, when Ukrainian cruise missiles rained down on a major production plant in the town of Alexeyevka in Belgorod region, they caused irreversible damage. This facility, which had already been damaged after a UAV raid earlier in the month, was now completely wiped out by a follow-up strike with cruise missiles. On the surface, this may seem like an ordinary civilian industrial target, but from the perspective of geopolitical experts, this is a crippling blow to Russia's defense industry. Russian ammunition will have a much shorter shelf life, a higher risk of spontaneous detonation and storage, and unreliable weapon performance when fired. As part of this campaign, a series of strategic ammunition depots near the Prokhorovka area, along with Russian command posts and drone control centers, have been leveled. The border province of Belgorod, which serves as the vital supply base for the entire northern and central Russian forces, is the direct supply point for the two main offensive directions, Kharkiv and Lyman. The strike on Belgorod has directly reduced the quality of weapons at the supply hub. On June 22, the Ukrainian Air Force carried out a deeper and more dangerous strike right into the heart of Russia's defense industry. The target attacked in Voronezh was the heart of the strategic missile production chain, the Voronezh Semiconductor component factory. By using long-range cruise missiles, most likely the British-made Storm Shadow, Ukraine delivered consecutive precision strikes along the length of the main production building. This is not an ordinary mechanical workshop, but a facility that manufactures more than 900 different types of electronic components, supplying inputs for over 1,000 defense enterprises across Russia. The customer list of this factory covers the most advanced destructive weapon systems of the Kremlin, from guidance microchips for Iskander, ballistic missiles, navigation computers for Kron 101 cruise missiles, to radar components for the Pantsir S-1 air defense system and sensor modules for the S-400 air defense system. The General Staff of Ukraine has sent a very strong message that crippling the capabilities of this facility will break Russia's ability to produce new types of missiles. This is a highly precise complex operating in an absolutely clean environment, where the production lines are extremely sensitive to dust, even the slightest vibration, and temperature fluctuations. The building's collapse and subsequent fierce fire completely destroyed these advanced microchip production lines. The detail that pushed Russia into a strategic dead end lies in the fact that this factory relied mostly on equipment. The advanced machinery produced by the West was originally purchased through official channels before the milestone year of 2014, or later through sophisticated sanction-evading networks. Now, under the suffocating international embargo, they have completely lost the ability to replace or even calibrate these complex machines. In March 2026, Russia used a Storm Shadow missile to destroy the Kremlin L factory in Bains, one of Russia's largest military microelectronics symbols. In May, the Progress facility in Cheboksary was taken out of action by a Flamingo cruise missile. This facility specialized in producing navigation receivers for long-range suicide drones, as well as Iskander and Kalitik cruise missiles, and now Voronezh. All three major semiconductor and military microelectronics factories of the Russian Federation were neutralized in just 3 months. Taken together, these attacks make Ukraine's strategy clearer than ever. Oil refineries burning have left the Russian military short of fuel, destroyed gunpowder factories have caused ammunition quality to plummet, and the demolished semiconductor complexes have dealt a crippling blow, shutting down the high-tech brains of Russia's entire strategic missile arsenal. So, in your opinion, with this situation, how long can Russia hold out? Or should Putin withdraw his troops soon to avoid heavy casualties?